We've got some off-price crack toys, 2 miles and miles of carpet tiles, TVs, deep freezing David Bowie LPs, pool games, gold chains, what's the names, and adipus, some Trevor Francis track suits from a mush and shepherd's bush.
I think in honour of the glittering array of talent that is now occupying the Cabinet generally and the Department of Culture, Media and Sport more specifically, we'll turn our attention to a speech given yesterday it was supposed to be given by Oliver Dowden, but he was obviously not able to take it because he was busy getting sacked or reassigned. He's been moved to become co-chairman of the Conservative Party. So it was given instead by his subordinate, I don't know what the correct word is, by the media minister, John Whittingdale. So I mention that because, you get given a speech and told to deliver it. I don't know whether it means you necessarily hold with every syllable contained within said speech. But I'll tell you how the Times reports it today. The Times, of course, no great supporter of public sector broadcasting because its owner makes a bulk of his fortune these days from private sector broadcasting, from commercial broadcasting. The BBC, ITV and Channel 4 will be forced to make more programmes with Britishness at their core under government plans. And he pointed to shows including Only Fools and Horses, Dad's Army and Coronation Street as being examples of distinctively British creations. Now, I genuinely don't know what that means. I had a fascinating conversation last night with an old mate of mine about patriotism and the desire, whether you like it or not, the desire to see your home, depending on how you define that, whether it is tiny and it is literally just you and your closest family members, or whether it's your city. Okay, I'm going to use London as an example. Okay, I love the fact that London is still, for now, a demonstrably better city than lots of other cities in other countries. I don't think that makes me racist or xenophobic or exceptionalist, but I really like the fact that London is an exemplar of many things that I consider to be desirable, whether it is the cultural, the rich cultural life of London, whether it is the diversity of London, whether it is, I do think, contrary to what many people who've never lived here think, it is a warm and welcoming place. You might not strike up conversations on public transport as readily as you do in Kidderminster or Doncaster, but you feel like a Londoner wherever you come from. I wasn't born here. And I don't apologise for that. That is a sincere and I think a rather nice emotional brick that is part of my construction. Okay, and I can feel like that about Britain as well, about the UK as well. It's why I get into slightly contorted territory when we talk about the prospect of Scottish independence. Because I feel that Adam Smith and Robert Louis Stevenson and John Stuart Mill, I like the fact that I think I play for the same team, in a sense, that they played for. And if Scotland becomes independent, I might feel a bit differently about that. Don't ring in on this bit of the conversation, dude. We're not going down the Scottish independent route today. I'm just talking about my concept of Britishness. I think Shakespeare is a better writer than Schiller. I should probably have a little bit more German, i.e. any German, before I could say that in complete conclusion. But I like that, and I would like Britain pre, post, or even if we'd never heard of Brexit. I would like my team, my home, my country. I'm not somebody who thinks everything is amorphous. Maybe I should be working a little bit harder to move in that direction. I'm not going to judge you as an individual according to where you come from, but I am, if you come from Kuala Lumpur, I am going to want my home city to win the Olympics, not your home city, right? That's one example. So this weird corruption of what patriotic means, instead of it being I want the best for Britain, we've allowed the current direction of traffic to turn patriotism into a green pass for hating on other people. Well, how patriotic are you? I am really patriotic, James. I hate all foreigners. We got that patriotic text in earlier from the woman who doesn't think we should allow any immigration at all into the country because they can never share their values, especially their children, which, as you would have realised, would include the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Secretary of State for Health, the Secretary of State for Education, and countless other fine, upstanding citizens of this country. So I don't think that that's a bad thing. It may not be perfect. to want your country to do best, but it is a bad thing that patriotism has been turned into an invitation to just dislike and be negative about people who aren't from the same place that you're from. It's a large part of the reason why we're in such a mess. And of course, speaking of messes, I should tell you that Marks & Spencer's has just announced that it's closing 11 stores in France due to fresh and chilled food supply issues following Brexit, which is remarkable for two reasons. Number one is I think the head honcho at Marks & Spencer's was pro-Brexit and ignored all the warnings from people who explained why this might happen in the context of logistics and supply chains. And two, they've postponed it again so that the traffic of stuff coming into the UK is still not going to be checked at all because it's not ready. Business isn't ready. The government isn't ready. That phrase "oven ready" hasn't been heard for a while, has it? And obviously checks going out of the UK are now third country. The third country rules that the UK helped to write. We have to abide by them under the terms of that deal that got the current government elected. And that means that it's harder for British exporters to export into the European Union than it is for EU exporters to export into the UK. So we've given their businesses a rather spectacular commercial advantage over our own. But hey-ho, today's not the day for that. Today's the day for this. What does it mean? I worry that it's part of the process of rebranding patriotism as a sort of mild middle class racism. You know, the sort of not the sort of knuckle dragging National Front type racism, but the speaking too much foreign on a train type racism, or I wouldn't want to live next door to a Romanian type racism. That you know, slightly snidey racism. And that worries me because it's been so successful. This whole culture war is built upon the idea that patriotism is somehow synonymous with looking down on other countries, whereas it's simply wanting the best for your own country, where I come from, emotionally, intellectually, geographically. I want the best for my country. So what do you think Britishness means? 0345 606 0973. It's a very big goal that I'm inviting you to have a swing at. And sometimes the bigger the goal, the harder it is, would you believe, to encourage you to take a shot. Because, I mean, where do you even start on what British values even are? And today isn't one of the days, really, where I can give you a steer or an example, because I honestly don't know. I know that in France, because at first when I saw this story, I thought, oh, it's a bit like in France, where they have limits on how much non-French language programming can be broadcast. But it's a sort of cultural protectionism, but it's linguistic, it's not cultural. So in France, because they are very conscious of the march of American English and English around the globe, they're keen to protect the French language. So on French broadcasters, you go to somewhere like Greece, you'll see quite a lot of shows being subtitled, not even dubbed. So other countries will have the English shows on, but in France they are very keen to, or they used to be anyway, last time I checked, very keen to protect the French language. And I thought, well, perhaps that's what this speech is about. But it's not. It's got nothing to do with language. And I'll tell you something quite funny in a minute about some of the TV shows cited in this speech written by Oliver Dowden. So, and delivered by John Whittingdale, who admitted, before you have a swing at me, he admitted that Britishness is a nebulous concept, which means it's almost impossible to pin down. But he said that it should reflect the values of the country. So that's your double invitation. I agree with John Whittingdale that it's too nebulous a term to be able to describe. But I don't even know what British values are. And I'll take you back to this fear that we've turned patriotism into looking down on other countries. Because if you take something admirable and desirable and claim it as a British value, what are you saying to that French fella over there? What are you saying to that German? What are you saying to that Bangladeshi person over there? How can it be a British value? You know, you take something that is an example of humanitarianism or humanity or decency or even a Christian value. Still a Christian, here's a Christian value. You rebrand it as a British value. Well, it's not like Christ spent much time here, whatever William Blake might have wished, you know, or written about. those feet in ancient times did not walk upon England's mountains greens, or if they did, it's highly unlikely. And please don't at me with the suggestion that he might have been talking about Joseph of Arimathea rather than Jesus Christ himself. So is that a British value, my knowledge of William Blake's poetry? Well, how can it be? Because that particular poem was about a fella born in the Middle East who never came anywhere near this country. And here's the favourite bit of this story. What is O fora vidas? Do you know what O fora vidas is? No? Okay, how about this one? I think this is Dutch. What shifted? What shifted? Anyone want to join me tonight? Getting the old box set out for What Shifted? And finally, Brat Bratu. Brat Bratu. Coming up next on the Great British Radio Show, we shall look back fondly upon the great heyday of British values on television by watching an episode of Brat Bratu. What do you think they are? Well, they are the foreign versions, the foreign adaptations of a show cited in this speech as an example of British values. What's lovely jubbly in Portuguese? Anybody? No? Because that's what O Fora Vidas is. That's the Portuguese television programme, which stuck very close to the original with few changes. Instead of Peckham, the brothers lived in Sapadores, a poor borough of Lisbon. They drove a blue four-wheeler with Fintas and Fintas on the side. Import-export, New York, Paris, Sapadores on the side of the van. Even the Nelson Mandela House name stayed the same. And bonus points for keeping the original theme tune too. So is that Portuguese sitcom, let me get the name right, O Fora Vidas, featuring the Fintas brothers and their cheeky chappy escapades. This time next year, Fintas will be millionaires. Is that British values accidentally? I mean, or Portuguese values? Hop over to Holland, shall we, to the Netherlands. The first of the remakes, where the Trotters were renamed the Arsmans. And I mean, the physical resemblance between the character playing the Rodney character and Nicholas Lyndhurst is remarkable. And finally, Slovenia. That we even collaborated with John Sullivan, who wrote the original Only Fools and Horses. So is that Slovenian values that are on display in Brat Bratu? The tale of two Slovenian brothers and their cheeky chappy escapades. This time next year, Brat will be millionaires. The flat looks like the same set as the one that Del Boy lived in, and the character playing Del Boy has very similar. I didn't do well, all right, maybe because it didn't have enough Slovenian values in it. It got cancelled after 13 episodes. But do you see what I mean? It's possible that you can embarrass me even by explaining what these British values are in a way that makes it clear they don't apply to anybody else and they are somehow peculiarly British as Dick Van Dyke, for example. But I honestly don't know. And that's possibly not going to be the most fertile territory for us to explore together. I hope it is. I would urge you to ring in now and tell me genuinely what you think British values are, or how you would introduce more Britishness to television programmes. 0345 6060973. But the other question would be, why is the government doing stuff like this? That's what I'd love to hear your answers to too. Brat Bratu. Why would a senior politician deliver a speech? And again, I'm not necessarily holding Whittingdale's feet to the fire on this one. It was a speech that Oliver Dowden, probably the most enthusiastic culture war stormtrooper in the cabinet until yesterday, was supposed to deliver. Why are they doing it? Why would anyone make a speech calling for more British values to be in British television programmes without really being able to provide a really simple and clear analysis of what they mean? What are they trying to achieve with this stuff? If it's impossible to actually understand what they mean, they must be up to something else. What are they up to? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And I'll leave you with a thought from John Cooper, who wonders whether Goodness Gracious Me displays British values. Is Goodness Gracious Me a television programme that is steeped in the requisite Britishness? And if not, Why not? Got a little bit of a mention to Councillor Majid Khan up in Doncaster, who's clearly listening today and has leapt upon a little throwaway comment of mine a moment ago about, it's because it was my first home was in Doncaster, and my mum, who's from Sheffield, is a great one for starting conversations with complete strangers on public transport, which has always been a little bit exercising when we're on the London Underground. But Councillor Khan is clearly listening today. He's just tweeted, as confirmed by Mr. James O.V., Doncaster is the friendliest place in the UK. A little fast and loose with the truth there, Councillor, but I admire your chutzpah. Can I use the word chutzpah, which I think has its origins in Yiddish, without breaking my promise to have more Britishness on the programme, to have more British values on the programme? There's another good example, and I like this. I wish I'd thought of this, because it's clever, this is. Maybe Shakespeare should have concentrated more on British themes rather than Venetian merchants, Danish princes, and Roman emperors. I don't know why you haven't signed that. I'd have been very proud of having that one there. And on a slightly less cheerful note, suggestions of shows that may not be included in the definition Britishness. It's suggested here those shows might include, for example, Goodness Gracious Me, Desmond's, The Real McCoy, and others. I wonder whether you can work out the reasoning behind that suggestion. Maybe the chap who wrote the speech doesn't feel represented on TV amongst all the diversity. Maybe he feels underrepresented, so I guess he agrees with the immigrant generations and descendants of this nation that representation matters. So what does it mean? British values, Britishness in the context of making television programmes. And what do you think Oliver Dowden, who's now moved on to be co-chairman of the Conservative Party, what do you think he was... If he couldn't tell us exactly what he means, because you mention Only Fools and Horses as an example, and I point out there's a Slovenian version, a Portuguese version, and a Dutch version, and that's just at first glance. What does it mean? Dragos. Can I have you on the show, Dragos? That's not a very British name. I don't know if I'm allowed to have you on the programme. I'm worried that I might get shut down by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport for not embracing Britishness. But let's wait and see. I'll keep an eye on the door. You talk quickly.
Yeah, thanks for having me, James, first-time caller, welcome listener as well. Thank you. I am both a Romanian and a British citizen, and I'm listening to your show this morning a little bit. So, I kind of agree with you. Obviously, agree with you. It's a giveaway. But in terms of what does this Britishness mean that we keep talking about, and I think two things I want to say really is that the shows that these people have kind of mentioned in the in this speech. I keep asking myself why. I haven't really watched Dad's Army and Only Fools and Horses. I've only watched really clips on YouTube.
Sure.
And I was asking myself,
how can you not have watched Dad's Army? It's on every bloody day.
Yeah, well, exactly. I'll try and fit it in my diary.
It is very, very good. I have to. I do think it's a brilliant TV show.
Yeah, absolutely. But I was thinking, why not Blackadder? Why not Mr. Bean? When I was growing up in Romania, Mr. Bean was a feature. I associated that with Britishness in a positive way because I could see that it's a satire, it's a joke, and whatnot. Or Blackadder again, something like that.
Well, I don't know. They may. I think Blackadder did get a mention. Actually, in fact, I know that it did. It got the final episode of Blackadder Goes Forth was name checked specifically. So I'm not. Yeah. I don't know that I'm that interested in why didn't they mention this? Why didn't they mention that? Well, I am in the context of why they didn't mention Desmond's The Real McCoy and Goodness Gracious Me, but Blackadder is very much about English history, not even British history, actually. It's very much about English history, and so I'm not surprised to see that on the list. What do you think it means, the phrase British values? Well,
British values. Well, I think it's important when we say this phrase or when we think of Britishness to own or to think about the highs and also the lows at the same time.
Yes.
And not to go into this exercise of developing into this exercise in triumphalism.
Triumphalism, or it's not even triumphalism because there's not a great deal to celebrate. It's a sort of certainly looking at trade negotiations and the complete confusion among many Brexiters as to why other countries aren't rolling over to give us everything we ask for. It's this odd subconscious belief that the countries that you look down on must actually simultaneously be looking up to you. And of course they're not. They're busy getting on with their own priorities and not sort of dreaming of the day that that Brits turn up and show them the way forward. Are there any programmes, post-Ceausescu, are there any programmes on British television that you watch and you think, oh my God, they'd never show this, they'd never make this in Romania?
Ooh, I don't know. I don't get too much to watch much daytime TV. To
Doesn't have to be daytime. It could be nighttime. It could be anything. Post Ceausescu, which I think is a crucial distinction to draw. I just think that's the problem at the heart of this rhetoric. Is essentially saying we need programmes with more Britishness at their core. Is saying there's a type of programme we can make, and they'd never make it in Romania.
Well, I mean, I don't know what to say specifically to this, but I will say something that I grew up in Romania with 100% sort of programs on TV and on radio. They were focused on nationalism, on the national identity, on a sense of greatness. I don't think it did any good, honestly.
They were steeped in Romanianism and
absolutely until you drown, and then you can't. You're kind of again in another bubble with very thick walls, and nothing can get through, or very little can get through, and that's very dangerous. It's very
well. Of course it is, and it is. I think you're right. It is hard. In the absence of another explanation or a better description of what they were talking about, one wonders whether it is actually a little bit nationalist and more akin to the kind of output that Nicolae Ceausescu might have overseen, as opposed to perhaps Lord Reith. 28 minutes after 11 is the time. Dragos, many thanks. Ferdinand, it's a slightly suspicious name, but I'm going to take a risk on it. Ferdinand is in Turriff in Scotland. Ferdinand, what would you like to say?
Well, I have an interesting background. So I'm of Polish ancestry. I'm German by birth. I'm an Irish citizen, and I live in Scotland.
You're going to get me taken off air. There's nowhere near enough Britishness there.
Well, I live in Britain, and I've lived in England in the past as well.
Yes.
And what I would say is that I suppose I was attracted to Britain because it has a history of culture that I find very acceptable. You know, writers like Shakespeare, you mentioned, Dickens, a concept of openness, tolerance, welcoming. But now you get to a point where patriotism is mentioned, and patriotism becomes a kind of a slogan that's used to shore up nationalism. And, you know, so when people say patriotism now, they think of Farage, really, rather than the kind of values that I've talked about. So I think when politicians start talking about British values, they don't mean the sort of things that I've just said. They probably mean the sort of things that you've said. Let's circle the wagons and ensure that we don't let others in, that we prioritize our own values over others that we think we're better than them. And I think we have to be very suspicious when politicians start talking about things like that.
Well, and again, in the absence of a better explanation, it's hard to avoid the conclusion that this is what they are nudging and winking into existence, isn't it? So Whittingdale says it's a nebulous concept.
Particularly given the times we're in and Brexit and
so what would be? Can you? I mean, your remarkably mixed background. Let's pick up on one element of it. Can we pick up on the German element of it? Do you ever watch any? Because do you know? I'm told they did Monty Python in German. The original Pythons recorded the whole flipping thing in German. So does it cease to be British values on display in Monty Python when they record? Can you think of something on British television and you could say to yourself, in all honesty, that this would never get shown in Germany, this would never get made in Germany, this would never happen in Germany?
Well, Germans binge watch British shows, particularly comedies.
Traitors.
Yeah. So, and in fact, when German comedians are on television, often they use very British type of techniques of comedy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and there was a very famous German comedian called Loriot, which again is funny, he's a French name, but actually German. And he'd always said that when he put comedy on, or when he wrote comedy, he always thought first of how the British did it.
Well, that makes me proud. That makes me proud. There's a great cultural export there.
Yeah, well, yes, and it is, and it's a successful export. But then again,
and we got Henning Venn. We got Henning Venn in return. Henning Venn, my friend, who's a brilliant comedian. That was the cultural exchange with Henning.
Yep. So I mean, when you talk about British values in Germany now, people get very suspicious because of Brexit has poisoned all of that.
Yeah, well, obviously on this programme, people won't be surprised to hear regular listeners and callers making that suggestion, and you are not just welcome but positively encouraged to refute it and to challenge it. But in the context of this government, still very much a vote leave government, and the question of what they mean when they say we need more Britishness on the telly, we need more British values on the telly, what on earth are they talking about? And if they're not actually talking about anything deliverable, what are they trying to do? What are they introducing or trying to introduce into the public sphere with this sort of language? And yet another sparkling example of how on the money and up to date this programme is. I think John Whittingdale might have been sacked while we were talking about him. Sky News is reporting that he's been removed as a media minister and is returning to the backbenches. Given who is still in charge and given who is about to take up the role of Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, I think it's unlikely that this signals an abandonment of the idea that there should be more Britishness on British television, despite the fact that it's almost impossible to understand what that means. I'm sure that the new Secretary of State will bring the clarity and cleverness to the role for which she is rightly renowned. But it's still an interesting conversation here. I mean, it is meaningless, isn't it? And yet it's very easy to cast me as being offensive when I say that it's meaningless, because if you've been groomed into thinking that patriotism involves an invitation to be nasty, rather than an invitation to be the best, to be better. It's about denigrating others rather than celebrating ourselves and each other. Then say this, I don't even know what British values are. There's a Slovenian version of Only Fools and Horses. Naked Attraction is a British export. How many countries have we exported Naked Attraction to? Does it cease to be a wonderful emblem of British values when it arrives in Russia, for example? See naked Russian people appearing on a strange television programme. Are they British? Is that British values being exported around the world? But I'm stressing right from the start of this what I think pride, national pride, what patriotism should be. I don't think it should be someone speaking foreign on a train. Don't mention the fact that my own children speak foreign at home because I'm trying to muster up a little bit of support among racists. Or I wouldn't want to live next door to a Romanian. Does that mean that Channel 4 shouldn't have shown a British, Romanian, Chinese tennis star wowing the world on Saturday night? Is that? I don't know. Oh, is that enough British values? It's a funny old game, isn't it? Lucy's in, and also I need more suggestions from you on how I can make this show more reflective of British values. The best so far from Tom. We're going to make the queue longer. You're going to have to wait longer to get on air, which means my monologues tomorrow will start coming in at 30 minutes rather than at 15 minutes. A nice long British queue, a good old-fashioned British queue, monologue right until past. We're going to get a lot more flags in the studio. We might do what this French MP, who sounds like he could probably get a job in this government, or not even an MP, he's running for president, wants to ban all foreign names, wants to get rid of names like Kevin and Jordan and Mohammed on the grounds that they are not suitably French. He's trying to get Frenchness, more Frenchness in christenings and baptisms and whatever the other religious equivalents of those processes and ceremonies may be. So we might all have to... James is all right, isn't it? We've had a King James. Yeah, it used to be saints. If you're getting confirmed in the Catholic Church, you have to choose the name of a saint. And some of them are quite funky, actually. At my school, it was a bit of a game to try and find one that was quite obscure or unheard of. A mate of mine was Mungo. I was a right old boring Joseph, but he was a Mungo. From now on, you're only allowed to ring into this programme if a monarch of England has borne the same name as you. All right? It has to be an actual monarch of England has borne the same name as you. You don't have to be necessarily named after the monarch, but you're only allowed to ring into the programme if there was a king or a queen in our history with your name, which makes it very embarrassing that the next two callers are called Lucy and Barbara. We'll start with Lucy, who's in Tottenham. Lucy, what's going on?
Hiya.
Hello.
I love your show.
Oh, so do I.
Just wanted to put that out there.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you very much. A woman of impeccable
so what
taste.
I wanted to say...
Is it the Britishness that appeals to you? Is it the British values that run through every minute of this entertainment that appeal to your patriotic heart, do you think, Lucy?
Definitely.
Quite right, too.
No, what I was going to say was that I think Britishness is British life. So you have quite a lot of shows on television now that kind of explore not maybe the stereotypical kind of white kind of fools and horses, kind of old school kind of...
Don't forget Denzel. Don't forget Denzel in no, thank you.
But you have lots of shows like Killing Eve, as was mentioned. Even though it's by BBC America, it really focuses on kind of the British kind of side, and then obviously incorporates other cultures, which I think is really good.
What show was that?
That is a good Killing Eve.
Oh, Killing You, yes.
Killing Eve.
Killing Eve.
Sorry.
Killing Eve with Sandra Oh.
Killing Eve.
Eve.
Yeah.
Oh.
Eve.
Yes.
And then you also have It Is a Sin and
It's a Sin.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, but I mean, yes, and that's a fantastic, one of the best things I've seen in a very long time. But I don't know if that's what John Whittingdale was talking about when he mentioned Dad's Army and Coronation Street.
Oh, because that's to me, because I'm Black British.
Yes.
So it's kind of what I interpret that as, which is just British life. Lady Parts is a very good one. Explores kind of these women who are, forming a band, and they are not white, but they are British, and they live a British life, and their characters are relatable, and
But are you? I wonder if you're doing the opposite of what was intended. You're describing, I think, this era. You're describing Britain in the 21st century, and there is a temptation. There's a temptation to see what John Whittingdale, the former media minister now, said last night in a speech written by the former Secretary of State for Culture, Oliver Dowden. It does read a little bit like a call for a return to the days of.
Oh, to the good old days, yeah.
I think that was actually a show.
I do think that, but I don't think this is kind of the death nail in multiculturalism and kind of freedom of expression in terms
Which means they're not really expecting anything to happen. They just think that they're going to hit some buttons and
hope that something,
and people are going to think they're on our side. They want more Dad's Army. No one's mentioned It Ain't Half Hot, Mum. Have you ever seen It Ain't Half Hot, Mum?
No, to be honest, I'm actually quite young. I think.
No, I know you are. I mean, it's available on the YouTube. You don't have to watch it on your Betamax video recorder. You can go find it, but it is astonishingly. It's amazing how shocking it is now, and things that I watched as a kid and didn't even realise were shocking. And there's a slight fear for me that some of this rhetoric is almost, we should go back to the days when we made programmes like that and we didn't worry so much about offending people or representing minorities or reflecting diversity, which is why all of the shows you have recommended as reflecting British values probably do. I think, or Britishness, British modernity, let us say. And the real problem being expressed here, the appeal is to people who are troubled by modernity. And it is once again an appeal to a sort of faux nostalgia, Lucy. Thank you. 11:43 is the time. Barbara, was there ever a Queen Barbara?
I don't know. Maybe.
Barbara Royal. Barbara Royal in the royal family. You're allowed to come on the programme. You're reflecting British values. What would you like to say?
I was already connected before you said that, so tough.
Fantastic.
I'm on it now.
Barbara?
You think you have problems with defining Britishness or patriotism.
Yes.
What happens if you are dual nationality?
I hope to be soon, actually, Barbara. I hope to be dual nationality soon, but that's a conversation for another day.
I tell you what, I was deported from my country during the war as a child.
Oh.
I'm quite old, so I was deported from my country, travelling through Siberia. Well, travelling, being taken through Siberia, through Kazakhstan, through Iran, through Persia, same thing, Lebanon. Eventually, I was brought as a teenager to England.
Gosh.
Joined the Polish Scouting Association, and we've had umpteen conversations, discussions about who we are. Are we Polish Brits? Are we American Polish?
Yes.
It went on and on. And, I was asked once, if Poland and England were at war, which side would I be on? Difficult to answer, wasn't it? So there are certain parts of me that are like my patriotism for Britishness is my gratitude to England for taking me, for educating me, for giving me food, for clothing me. My Polishness is it's been drummed into me right through my refugee life.
And do you know, here's the thing, because the government that has put this in the mix today, any adults that helped you get here as a refugee in the 1940s or 50s, we're pretty sure that 1948, we're pretty sure that Priti Patel's legislation would render not throw you out, but anyone who helped you get here would be a criminal now under the legislation put forward by this government, telling us to embrace more British values in our television programmes. Slightly ugly when you put it like that, I think, or when I put it like that.
But then my brother fought in the Polish army, Monte Cassino, which was then under the British command, I think.
Yes.
So it was sort of joining in a family.
We're going to run out of time, but I'm really drawn to that question. I mean, normally it would be we'd ask who you support in a football match, wouldn't we? But I mean, a war is.
This is what I was to say to you. When my sons watch Brazil and England, we're winning. But when they watch Poland and, again, Brazil perhaps, we're winning. Yes. But what happens when they watch a match with Poland-England?
Yes.
And it's usually,
Well, I'm like that when it's England-Ireland in the rugby, you see, and I'm very much a plastic paddy. I've never lived there or anything like that, but it is, and it's not. It's not a problem. It's just it means we're not as perhaps entrenched as other people are. But if it was a war, I think perhaps it would be more what was the war about would be how you picked what side you were on, I think, maybe.
I suppose so, yes. I don't know. As I said, in the Polish Scouting, we've had these conversations umpteen times.
Of course
now,
you
and
have.
We don't really know, where we belong. That this is.
Well, you belong here. You belong here.
Well, yes.
But belonging is defined and delivered by people, isn't it? Not by postcode. So your sense of belonging is going to be determined in part by your neighbours, which is why letting people get into the public mainstream who would say, I wouldn't want to live next door to Polish people or a group of Polish men, or I wouldn't want to live next door to a Romanian. That perhaps has diminished the sense of belonging that people like you have enjoyed for decades.
Yes. Anyway, I've always wanted to say, I wanted to ring before that, but I wanted to say how eloquent you are. I wish I could master the English language like.
Oh, do be quiet. You're doing absolutely fine, Barbara. First of all,
I take a pen and pencil, pen and paper, and I write them down.
You're very kind, but listen, I only speak one language.
I speak two.
Well, there you go. You win. You win.
Yes, but I win. Oh, thank you. But then people ask me, what's your first language? My first language is a mixture, really. I miss words in the Polish language and I miss words in the English language, and when we're talking to my contemporaries, we use sort of, as I say, a mixture. We have to, because we don't know. The language, the Polish language in England is sort of, is not living. But you go back to Poland. I think my son, who's now working in Poland, I bet he speaks better Polish than I do. But it's this.
But this is humanity. Really... This is life. This is the world. It turns. We move. The ebbs, the flows, the tides of humanity that move in one direction and then in another direction. And there will always be points in history. God knows the reason why you had to flee Poland in the first place is the most poignant reminder of there will always be points in history when people want to resist that modernity, resist that, they want to, quote, take back control or whatever it may be. Barbara, I have to move on. I'm already 4 minutes late for the break, which I hope you take as a compliment to the quality of your contribution and your mastery of, or mistresy of the English language. Britishness, an hour of British, utterly Britishness, British broadcastingness, British values. What are they? Damned if I know. You name a value, and I'll point out someone who's not British who's got it, and it ceases to be a British value. Or does it? I don't know. But I do know that if I was Scottish, never mind Anglo-Polish or Brit-Polish or Britalian, as one of you has just described yourself. If I was Scottish, I'd be hearing this from my government. All of these great examples of Britishness. I don't remember many Scottish much Scottish representation in the examples given. And in fact, in some of them, I think in Blackadder, it's caricature. So how is it British? Right, A, it's English values. B, possibly, they just mean white values. Don't they? I don't know. But I do know that this is a government that thinks statues are more important than people. And flags, you can tell how suited someone is to a job by counting the number of flags in their study. 11:55 is the time. Barry's in Rochdale. Barry, what do you reckon?
Hi, James. Second-time caller. It was either this or Mystery Hour I was going to phone up for.
I hope you don't regret it.
Well,
you've made your choice.
It's a great question as well, to be fair.
Don't worry. No, not allowed.
Oh, it's a nightmare because it really is a great question.
Well, I'm here next week, don't worry.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, it's about British values. You mentioned a TV programme earlier. It's a great TV programme, comedy. It ain't half hot, Mum.
Yes.
And great theme tune, by the way, but that's another story. The thing is, I'm phoning up because I'm a working class lad from Rochdale, and my generation, as I guess yours was as well, was brought up on these World War II retro comedies, war films. Are you still there?
Yeah, no, of course I'm listening to you.
Sorry. So we're all brought up on these war films, and for a lot of people, and I'm not saying that everybody is the same, but a lot of people's history of British social history in the 20th century, namely the war, was borne out through these films and comedies. And a lot of these comedies that were made, they all had a lot of things. They had a lot of things in common, but one trait that went through most of them was racism, and the racism got a laugh, and it was that type of.
Is there racism in Dad's? I mean, it ain't off Hoffman.
Well, I don't know if it's to say it, but they don't like it up on.
You mean anti-German racism?
Well, not so much anti. No, Dad's army, the oldest one. He used to say because remember he was quite old, even though he was one of the youngest members of the program.
The character was old. Was it Clive Dunn?
Correct. Yeah. He used to say the abbreviations FW about the war in Egypt or Sudan.
But these weren't values. These were just standards that were considered funny at the time. Well, don't hurry because Mystery Hour's in a minute and a half, as you well know.
Yeah, of course we can't let anybody be late for that. But what it is basically is the working class people who I sort of represent, if you like. They've brought up all these values, and all of a sudden they're being told that all these values and everything, all of a sudden they don't count for anything anymore.
But Dad's army's never off the telly, Barry.
Exactly. No, exactly. That's my point. And I think this.
How can it not count for anything anymore if it's always on?
To me, it hit me like it hit me.
Well, just have a crack at answering the question because we're going to run out of time. You sort of feel that your heritage is being robbed from you, or it's been.
No, I'm not. I'm speaking on behalf of people.
Okay. So, well, then you say to them, how can you feel that it's been taken away from you when it's on telly every night? It's got more repeats than me after a curry.
No, it's true. That's true.
But they've been told to feel aggrieved. It's the professional grievance merchants. They've got their own television station now, apparently.
It reinforces. I'm saying these programmes, they've reinforced over the years this message of British superior, and it's always looking down upon people of.
Wow, you've knitted quite a lot together there. I think you made the right decision, not coming on Mystery Hour. But it is, and it's hard. It's a bit like nailing jelly to the wall. But we're all dancing around the suggestion that what they're really. I mean, you think of Love Thy Neighbour. Everyone's probably thinking of Alf Garnett, which no one would have the front to say we should bring back. Well, I can think of one person who might, but no one sensible or decent would have the front to say we should bring back Alf Garnett's kind of comedy. So it is this. You knit it all together, and there's a kind of sense of you know. It's that Stuart Lee line. You're not allowed to say you're English anymore without getting arrested.
And it's created a lot of animosity. But you know this, we spoke about this a lot on your show. Yeah. But the thing is, until we understand what them people, how do we now?
Well, you know the answer to that. I'm flipping heck. Someone over there is telling them to be frightened of this and frightened of that and angry about that and angry about this, and then you and me come along, mate, and our job is to put out the blue touch paper. Our job is to give people reasons to be cheerful instead of being bitter and resentful and angry and jealous and twisted and racist and nasty.
But it needs putting out, and how do we put it out? That's the thing.
Get all your mates to listen to me.
They wouldn't understand you, James. You speak a different language.
Rubbish. Alder Hill Comprehensive School. Tell them that I am deeply familiar with Alder Hill. That'll convince your mates that I can speak the same language as them.
James, the thing
Barry.
is, right, go on, can I make an analogy?
Very quickly, because the news is about to start.
It's a hard one, right, but it's like saying, right, to a working class person about...
You're doing that thing where you're using working class as a synonym for racist.
But, well, no, I'm not. I'm just saying because a lot of these, it's the red wall, James.
Well, you can say all these figures of speech. I know people in Rochdale who are every bit as outraged by the direction of traffic in this country in recent years, politically, racially, ideologically. And I also know people who went to Eton College, Barry, who are considerably more racist than any of your mates. So let's not let it be turned into a class issue.